So our history is filled with great people, heroes, icons, people we admire and look up to. And very often these were people that maybe didn't follow the rules, people that stood up to authority. Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat on the bus. The American founding fathers refusing to submit to British rule. I mean, when you talk about leaders breaking the law, we have everyone from Gandhi to Martin Luther King to Liu Xiaobo, whose political reforms helped end the Chinese Communist Party one-party rule. And yet the Bible, and even Jesus specifically, makes it a point to tell us to submit to our leaders, to submit to our governments. We're told to obey the law of the land. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, as in pay your taxes. So what's the deal? Were these great people of history sinning when they defied the law and didn't respect their leadership? Is there ever a time when rebellion is okay? And what does the Bible have to say? Let's take a look.
Attention, bargain shoppers.
So we are instructed by the Bible to obey our governing authorities. Paul writes in Romans 13, "Every person must obey the leaders of the land. There is no power given but from God, and all leaders are allowed by God. The person who does not obey the leaders of the land is working against what God has done. Anyone who does that will be punished." God has legitimized human government, but that's not to say that all government is perfect. But regardless, we're to respect the authority that is over us. However, Paul writes this verse about obeying our leaders, but he himself was jailed numerous times for preaching the gospel in defiance of the Roman laws at the time. He went out of his way to defy the law of the land, the will of his leaders. So was Paul sinning when he did this? Was Paul a hypocrite? Well, let me tell you this. Some people came to Jesus at one point and asked him a question, not out of a place of wanting to know his teachings, but for the purpose of trying to trap him. And in Mark chapter 12, they say, "Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay or not pay?" Now keep in mind, Jesus has no legitimate authority, nothing sanctioned by the government. His power comes from the populace, from people responding to his teachings, the number of followers he has, and his popularity. And his followers did not like the Roman government. Taxes specifically were a means of exploiting the people. So it would have been very unpopular for Jesus to say, yeah, go ahead and pay your taxes. But if he said, don't pay your taxes, then he'd be giving them ammunition to then go to the Roman government and say, hey, this guy's advocating for not paying taxes. He's subverting the Roman rule. So they're trying to trap him in a no-win situation. And then Jesus says this, "Bring me a small piece of money so that I may look at it." They brought him one. He asked them, "Whose picture is this? Whose name is on it?" They answered, "Caesar's." Then Jesus said to them, "Pay to Caesar the things that belong to Caesar. Pay to God the things that belong to God." And they were surprised and wondered at him. We must consider Jesus' words carefully here. We are to respect authority. We are to give to the government what we owe to the government. But then Jesus also carefully points out that it's our responsibility to give to God what belongs to God. The government has authority over us, but God has authority over the government. So what happens when those two things are in conflict? What happens when the government compels us to sin or prevents us from doing something that is required by God? And in that scenario, we are compelled to give to God what is God's. We see examples of this in Scripture. King Nebuchadnezzar in the Old Testament made a gold idol, and he commanded everybody to worship it. In Daniel chapter 3, we're told, "As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." So that was the law of the land. When you hear the horn, you need to worship the idol. And Daniel refused. But this does seem to be at odds with verses like 1 Peter 2:13, which tells us, "Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human authority, whether to the emperor as the supreme authority." And interestingly, Peter writes that after he's thrown in jail for not obeying the law. So it seems like Peter, just like Paul, writes one thing and does another. So are these guys hypocrites? Is the Bible contradicting itself? And the key to understanding this is understanding the Greek word used here for submit. And this is hupotasso, which means subject to. It literally means to arrange something in an orderly manner underneath. And this is a word that's very hierarchical in nature. We see it again in verses like 1 Corinthians 15:28. When he has done this, then the Son himself will be made subject to him who has put everything under him, so that God may be all in all. So this is a word that's talking about order. And there are other words that could be used for just simply obeying, but these authors instead use the word hupotasso, which refers to things being in relation to one another, parents being underneath children, creation being underneath mankind. God is a God of order. He doesn't want anarchy or discord, but we must also give to God what is God's. When the will of the governing authorities conflicts with the will of God, we need to stand up, just like Peter and Paul did. They spoke truth to power, but they still respected authority. They still submitted to authority by accepting the legal consequences for their actions. And the Bible is full of people opposing power. Everyone from the Hebrew midwives refusing to carry out Pharaoh's commands to murder children, to Daniel refusing to worship the king's idol. God's will is for us to live in harmony with our leaders, to submit to them, to live a peaceful life. Pray for kings and all others who are in power over us so that we might live quiet, godlike lives in peace. However, when our kings are unjust, when the laws don't respect human dignity, when God's will isn't being put first in the hierarchy, there is biblical precedent to obey God first, and then after that, submit to our authorities. So there you have it. I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please feel free to like and subscribe. It does help out the channel. I'll leave the verses used today in the description below. Feel free to leave a comment. That helps out the channel as well. My name is Adam. This is Bargain Bin Theology. And remember, you get what you pay for.